some of you guys, how did she put your diaper on? That's what I want to know. Because I know that shit, them Huggies, man, I don't know. Like, and you girls, you snow bunnies that have yet to experience a chocolate man, that's funny. You gotta realize, if he says to you he's about to beat that pussy up, girl, he's gonna do just that. He's gonna Chris Brown that shit.
Whenever virgin white women chose to engage in a physical relationship, they would often prefer black men. This privilege was exclusively given to black slaves, never to white men. Although slaves endured harsh conditions, they were given special consideration when needed in the beds of virgin white mistresses. Often, they were promised freedom and were forced to have intercourse with virgin white mistresses. But why did white mistresses only allow black men into their beds? What did white men lack that only black men could provide to virgin white mistresses? Let's find out.
The Black History Archives.
Black guys got like this. Like, I don't know. Okay, and I saved the best for last in my reasons. You guys, I think your mother, some of you, fed you steroids or took steroids while she was pregnant, because half of you motherfuckers are really half horse.
During the era of slavery, black men were often subjected to deeply ingrained stereotypes that painted them as hypersexual beings with an insatiable sexual appetite. These myths were not only products of racist ideologies, but also tools used to justify the dehumanization and control of black bodies. The notion of black men possessing extraordinary virility was widespread, perpetuated by pseudo-scientific beliefs and cultural narratives that framed them as inherently more physically powerful and sexually dominant than their white counterparts. For white mistresses, these stereotypes created a sense of forbidden temptation. The idea of engaging with a man perceived as having exceptional sexual prowess could be both thrilling and terrifying. Rooted in a mix of curiosity and societal taboo, the concept of exoticism played a significant role in the fetishization of black men. In the minds of many white people during the slavery era, black individuals were seen as the other, mysterious and fundamentally different from themselves. This othering process dehumanized black people, but also made them objects of fascination and desire. For white mistresses, this exoticism translated into a sexual curiosity about black men. The stark differences in appearance, culture, and social status contributed to an aura of mystery and excitement. Engaging in a sexual relationship with a black man was not just about the physical act. It was about crossing a deeply entrenched racial divide and experiencing something that was considered taboo and outside the norms of their controlled and constrained social environment. Historical accounts and case studies from the period often reflect these dynamics. For example, narratives from enslaved men, as documented in various slave narratives and oral histories, reveal instances where white mistresses pursued them, driven by the allure of their perceived exoticism and the power dynamics at play. In these accounts, enslaved men frequently describe feeling powerless and coerced, with little agency in these interactions. The fetishization and hypersexualization they experienced were not flattering or empowering, but rather forms of psychological and physical domination that reinforced their status as property rather than people. Another reason why black men were preferred was that white mistresses held absolute authority over the enslaved individuals in their beds. This power dynamic was central to the institution of slavery, where enslaved people were regarded as property rather than as human beings with rights and autonomy. White mistresses, as part of the slaveholding class, wielded this power in all aspects of their lives, including sexual relationships. For white mistresses, engaging in sexual relationships with black men provided an outlet to exercise and reinforce their dominance. In these interactions, the mistresses could explore their sexuality without fear of resistance or repercussion from the enslaved men, who were in no position to refuse or complain. The complete power imbalance meant that any semblance of consent from the enslaved men was inherently compromised, as they had no real agency or ability to refuse without facing severe consequences. And how did white virgin mistresses convince black men to be in their beds? Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community and we need your support. Let's continue now. White mistresses would offer better treatment, reduced labor demands, or protection from harsher punishments in exchange for sexual compliance. These promises exploited the precarious and vulnerable position of the enslaved men, who might see such relationships as a way to improve their harsh living conditions, albeit temporarily. Conversely, mistresses also used threats of punishment or retribution to force compliance. Enslaved men faced the constant threat of physical violence, sale to harsher conditions, or punishment for themselves or their families if they refused or resisted the advances of a white mistress. Enslaved men were often isolated from their families and communities, making them more vulnerable to exploitation. White mistresses would exploit this isolation to exert control, knowing that the enslaved men had limited support systems and avenues for resistance. The control and dominance exerted by white mistresses extended to reproductive aspects as well. Any offspring resulting from these relationships were typically considered slaves, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation. The children born from these unions often faced their own set of challenges, including social stigma and discrimination, further entrenching the systemic injustices of slavery. And what else played a role was that white women were subject to stringent social norms that tightly regulated their behavior, particularly their sexuality. These norms were rooted in the patriarchal values of the time, which emphasized purity, modesty, and obedience for women. A woman's reputation was closely tied to her sexual behavior, with virginity before marriage being highly prized. Any deviation from these norms could result in severe social consequences, including ostracism and loss of social standing. Within this context, white mistresses found themselves in a paradoxical situation. On one hand, they were expected to maintain an image of purity and virtue. On the other hand, their positions of power within the household gave them opportunities to exert control and explore their desires in ways otherwise denied them. The repression of sexual desires was a significant aspect of the lives of many white women during this period. Marriage was often not a matter of personal choice, but rather an arrangement dictated by family and social expectations. Many women found themselves in loveless or emotionally distant marriages, further intensifying their feelings of sexual repression. For some virgin white mistresses, the strict social norms and the repression of their desires led to a form of rebellion. Engaging in sexual relationships with black men, who were seen as the ultimate forbidden fruit, provided an outlet for these repressed desires. These relationships were acts of defiance against the societal constraints imposed upon them. These relationships challenged the rigid social hierarchies and norms of the time. Although clandestine and fraught with their own set of dangers, they represented a break from the expectations placed on white women. In a society that placed strict limits on their behavior, these acts could be seen as attempts to carve out a space for personal freedom and expression. But did these virgin women face any consequences? During the era of slavery, interracial relationships were heavily stigmatized and condemned, particularly relationships between white women and black men. However, the consequences of these relationships varied significantly based on the parties involved. For white mistresses, engaging in relationships with black men was considered shameful, but the social repercussions were often less severe compared to similar relationships with white men. White mistresses could rationalize their actions by dehumanizing their black male partners. This dehumanization, a cornerstone of the institution of slavery, allowed mistresses to view these relationships as less significant and less morally compromising than relationships with white men. Because black men were seen as property, interactions with them were not subject to the same social scrutiny and moral judgments as interactions with white men. Furthermore, the secrecy that surrounded these relationships was a key factor in their dynamics. The social structure of the time made it easier for mistresses to conceal their affairs with black men. Any children born from these unions were usually incorporated into the enslaved population, thereby minimizing visible evidence of the relationship and reducing the risk of scandal. By engaging in relationships with black men, white mistresses could deflect some of the blame and guilt associated with losing their virginity before marriage. In a society that values female purity and chastity, the consequences of premarital sex with a white man could be severe, including loss of social standing and marriage prospects. Relationships with black men, however, were more easily hidden and rationalized as a lesser transgression, given the dehumanized status of enslaved individuals. The perceived safety of engaging with black men also played a significant role. Relationships with white men carried a higher risk of discovery and subsequent scandal due to the closer social scrutiny and interconnectedness of the white community. In contrast, relationships with black men were less likely to attract attention, partly because enslaved men had no social standing and their voices were not given credence. These were the reasons why black men were preferred more in bed with virgin white mistresses than men. Do you think? Is this the reason why black men are still hypersexualized? Why are the myths still alive? Let us know in the comments section if there is something black men can do in bed and white men can't. Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to the Black History Archives and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.